We are here today on the HSL Musicians page. I am Zach Silberschlag. I play principal trumpet with the Hawaii Symphony, and I'm having more hair. I think we're gonna have to just leave it. You can't get a haircut. Anyway, I'm here today to talk with one of my good friends who is, I think, one of the most active and influential members of the Hawaii and Honolulu music community, and I thought that would be an interesting change of pace for these weekly live streams that the Hawaii Symphony musicians are doing. And so we're going to talk to Randy Wong, who is a bassist in the symphony, and along with being a bassist in the Hawaii Symphony, he is also the president of the Hawaii Youth Symphony. He is a graduate of NEC and Harvard and the winner of many awards, and so we're going to talk to him about music and his life and his path to where he is now. And so let me try to invite him to this discussion. Randy?
Whoa. Hey, Zach.
How you doing?
I'm okay. How are you?
I am good, but I am getting a lot of comments on my hair from people that I'm in quarantined with, and you are there looking fantastic with a fantastic haircut. So I'm a little jealous.
Oh, well, I can save an appointment for you next time we get out of quarantine. I gotta thank my wife
That would
for
be
doing my hair, man. I mean, she's amazing. She could do everything. She's a
that would be
violinist and
great.
learned how to cut
Yes,
hair on YouTube and
she's a violinist in the symphony and a member of the Galliard String Quartet,
yeah,
and
she is.
right. So anyway, shout out to Helen. Randy,
Yeah.
thanks for being here. And can you hear me okay? Is the connection coming through okay?
Yeah, it's great. Yeah.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks for this opportunity, Zach. It's great to
No, thank
get to
you.
hang out.
Well, I introed you a little bit, but I would love it if you would be willing to tell us a little bit about your path and how you even came to start playing music and playing the bass in Hawaii, in Honolulu, where you're from.
Okay, sure thing. Well, I have to give a big thank you to my parents, Mike and Tarina. They're both amateur musicians and serious in the music community here. My dad
Wh-
more on the Hawaiian music side, and my mom, the first person I knew that really loved classical music. And
Oh, wow.
so growing up, um, you know, they were pretty quick to sign me up for music lessons. The first thing that I did was actually a fixed do solfege through Yamaha. We didn't know that it was supposed to be piano, so we just did the solfege part. Later on, I started playing piano, and I realized I really didn't like it. And I was fortunate that at my elementary school, Hanaho'oli School, they did have a music program, and so everyone was required to start playing an instrument in third grade. And I don't really remember how or why I chose the bass, but apparently I did. And before long, my parents had to get a station wagon to cart the bass around. And I got to jam with my father, who plays slack key guitar.
Oh,
And
wow.
he would always kind of Cunny Capilla with the, like all my Calabash uncles. So that was a big influence on me growing up. I got to sit in with Puamana, which is a very famous Hawaiian trio. And and so that kind of followed me through. I started in the youth symphony in third grade.
Oh,
My
wow.
elementary, yeah, my elementary string teacher, Karen Bechtel. She was a cellist in the Honolulu Symphony, and her father, Dale, was a really famous violinist and violin pedagogue here in Honolulu. And so Mrs. Bechtel recommended that, if I was interested in getting more serious about playing the bass, that I could do it. I could join the string orchestra ensemble in the Hawaii Youth Symphony. And luckily, I think the audition must not have been too hard because I got in. And that was my start. That was my introduction to HYS.
Oh,
And then
wow. Where you're now, right. Where you're now
yeah,
the
and so
president. So it's
where I'm
really
now the
full
president.
circle. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we have some really amazing. Everyone on our faculty is super amazing, and so there's even folks that I had the privilege of getting to play music under when I was a kid that are still in the HYS faculty.
And so
And
it's
so
an
anyway,
organization that it's an organization you've been involved with since you were about 9, right?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
about
Wow.
9. So
Yeah.
I did HYS for 10 years, and through that, when I went to Iolani School for middle and high school, and
Right.
so at Iolani I played in marching band, I played in jazz band, I took music theory, I even played in orchestra for a year, and music was always a big part of my life growing up, and so with HYS kind of running parallel to it, it just seemed like it's like music chose me, like I really wanted to, you know, be in the next best ensemble and then take more lessons with other people and go to summer
Right.
festivals and that sort of stuff. And
And
so I think
I got a
yeah.
comment. It says, I think maybe this is from somebody you know. It says, "Great son."
Oh yeah, it's my mom. Hi, mom.
So, and what instrument does she play?
My mom plays the harp and
Oh,
piano.
wow.
Yeah,
Wow. And so
yeah.
is there when you were growing up, were there some family jams and stuff like that as well?
I was probably too uh yeah, there are some family jams. There probably should be more family jams.
Yeah, I feel the same way.
Yeah,
Yeah, I understand.
yeah,
So
yeah.
sorry to interrupt. So, but you were saying music chose you, and it was really a gradated path to you wanting to move up through the HYS ensembles,
Right.
and which ultimately led you to pursuing this more and more seriously.
Yeah, I mean, as a bass player, like we're not limited to only playing an orchestra. We can also play in so many different other types of music and other things. So, I was lucky I got to play in marching band because we didn't have tubas.
Right.
So I got to play electric bass. I was in the
Oh,
pit, and
awesome.
then for
Awesome.
a little while I marched bass drum because I thought that'd be cool. I played
Was
in
it
I played
cool?
it. You know what? I really enjoyed it. I wouldn't trade. It was a great experience, and there's a lot of fun to be had in marching band.
Awesome, awesome. And that was at Iolani where you went to high school.
Yeah, that was at Iolani. And then I did like I played in jazz band. I played in wind ensemble. I had
Right.
a teacher, this guy Derek Higashi, who played in wind ensemble at UH and so forth. And so he was like, "Hey, you should play in a wind ensemble." So I found some concert bands that I could play with.
Wow. And that
And
was on Oahu, these concert bands?
yeah, yeah, like I got to play with Pearl City High School's concert band. They had a really great concert band.
Right.
And so like, you learn about tuba parts and bassoon and
Bass
contrabassoon parts and
lines.
bass
Yeah.
lines and doubling and how the bass really works in so many different contexts.
That's awesome. And so, uh, where in this were you? Did you have a private bass teacher, or was that something that came later? Or was it this cello teacher that you had mentioned before that really set you up for success?
Well, sure. I mean, Karen Bechtel was like, my first teacher, but she really started me with symphony players right away. So I was studying with Gary Hickling, who was in the
Okay.
in the Honolulu Symphony, and then thereafter I started studying with other HSO musicians, Kirby Nunez, um, and Mike Gorman. Mike Gorman was the one who sent me to college.
And did you find that because I think what you're describing is you were really had access to top level education with HYS and high school and a
Mm.
strong music program in high school, and then with the symphony orchestra being so available to you, would you say that that was because of the smallness of the island, or because a lot of people were caring about music education? And I mean, I know these are causes that are close to you that you're helping
Hmm.
in a huge part make possible for kids now.
Yeah, I think a combination of all of those things. I mean, one thing that we really have going for us here is that it is a very small and close-knit community. And so there's a lot of hands that make, it's like that saying, a lot of hands make light work, right?
Right,
And
right.
so I don't think it would be fair to attribute any one particular thing to, the growth of our kids. Like I would never say that HYS is responsible wholly for, someone getting into
Of
whatever,
course, right.
but it's the combination of all of these things together that makes our community what it is and makes our kids what they are.
Right. And would you say that that was, I know you've pioneered also side-by-sides with the Hawaii Symphony Orchestra, which I've been a part of with the Hawaii Youth Symphony, which have been incredible and have led to a lot of, I think, really growth both by the musicians and the students. That is really, that's something that is really important.
Oh yeah, I mean, I didn't pioneer the side-by-side. That'd be giving me too much credit. But you know, there was a side-by-side activity that took place in 2008 before I joined HYS, and we know as musicians, I think that whenever you have a relationship between a professional musician and a student, there's a really great opportunity there for role modeling and mentoring, and whatever we can do to make those relationships happen, because you know, not everybody takes private lessons, and not everybody has the opportunity, has the time in their schedule even to go to a symphony concert or to, listen to orchestral music at home. Of course, we'd like them to, but not everybody's able to do it all the time. So if we can create like a curated space for symphony and youth symphony musicians to come together, then that's great. And yeah, we started it in 2017 with Joe Stepek. And we just completed our third year of HYS, HSO side-by-sides. And certainly for me growing up, I didn't have a side-by-side experience, like an official side-by-side experience. But hearing from, all of our friends that were in major cities across the country, and they had them in their communities. So, I think we're all on the same page about it being important for our kids and hopefully for our professional orchestra as well.
That's awesome, and thanks for continuing to make that more and more. So when you were doing youth symphony, you were in high school, you were playing in all these ensembles that you said. Was there a moment at that point that you said you really wanted to pursue this professionally, or you wanted to go to school for this, or what was that process like? And
okay, go ahead. Yeah.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, like, it comes to a certain point where you start to seek opportunities beyond your community and maybe beyond your comfort zone. And so, I went to a summer camp, Idlewild in California, that it was like my first time away from home, and I was gone for 2 weeks, and I really, really missed home. Yeah. But I also really liked music. I was like, oh, this is so cool, and then the following year, I applied for this program, Boston University Tanglewood Institute, BUTI.
Okay. Yeah.
And it just so happened that the bass teacher at that program, his name's Todd Sieber, and he's a section bassist in the Boston Symphony. And he actually grew up in Hawaii. He started playing bass in Kailua, where he was a student of George Wellington.
You're from Kailua?
Yeah.
Okay.
And George Wellington is, father to HSO violinist Fumi Wellington.
Oh,
and
wow.
To former New York Philharmonic bassist George Wellington Jr.
Wow.
And so and George Wellington Sr. has had just like an incredible like cadre of young bass players, and Todd Sieber was one of those students.
Yeah, and so were you one of the first students to go study with Todd Sieber at BUTI from Honolulu, from Hawaii?
I was, yeah. Yeah,
and there's been a real nice connection because there's been several that have since done that, right?
Right. There's been at least a half dozen. After me, Matt Love, who's in the HSO section. Right. Kathy Schulmeister, who has been in the section, and she was just nominated for a Grammy. Right. Vladimir Bernstein also went to BUTI. There have been a number of folks that have gone through. Of all of us, I think it was me, Matt, Kathy, and Kioe Wellington, who went to BUTI and then went to NEC.
Right, and so when you went to BUTI the first time, about how old were you?
I was 16.
And so I know that when I was thinking about this the other day, when I was 16 or 17, I was super ambitious about looking for things that I could go and be with other kids to have fun, and music was a way for me to do that. So was that how was just sort of your own initiative? Because I know that a lot of 16-year-olds out there want to go to music festivals or don't even know they want to go to music festivals yet.
I didn't even know that I wanted to go to it. My teacher told me this is well, I think he told my parents, hey, Randy should do this, and before I knew it, I was I was out in Lenox, Massachusetts. But it was great. At that point, I remember like I had never that summer we played like Brahms' Second Symphony,
Right.
which is remains to be like one of my favorite pieces. We played La Mer. We played Nielsen's Fourth Symphony, the Inextinguishable, which is like this
Whoa.
crazy like monstrosity. But but at that point, I hadn't. It was the first time that I ever played a full symphony.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So at the time
Um,
of with the Hawaii Youth Symphony, I think you told me this, that you were not doing complete symphonies, which I know is something that
right.
since you've become the president, that's changed, that you are doing.
Yeah. We it used to take a different. Every music director has a different direction.
Right.
And so I certainly got a lot of really great repertoire and experience from HYS when I was in it.
Of
But one
course. Yeah.
experience that I hadn't had was to play a full work.
Yeah.
And so that summer there were 3 concerts, and so we played like 9 full works.
Right.
And I didn't know that you could major in music actually. And
Oh,
I
wow.
only found out from this friend that I made, who is now my wife. Helen. She was saying that she was going to major in violin. I was like, what?
Whoa.
Wow, you can do that?
So
Yeah,
this
you
was at
can.
BUTI where you met
Yeah,
Helen. Oh,
yeah,
wow. Yeah.
yeah. So that
And
was
so she said she could she's from Maryland, right?
yeah. She's from Maryland. Yeah,
And so she said, she opened your world by saying you could major in music. It was
yeah,
possible to do
right. And then I said, even bass players, and she's like, well, I don't know.
that.
Yeah,
So then you came back from BUTI, and did you only go once?
I went twice.
And so was that then already clear? Was that a clear path to NEC? Did you audition
Hmm.
there? How did that audition process work? And
Yeah, I mean, when I came back after that first summer, I talked to my teacher. I said, I found out that you can major in music. I really I'd really like to do that.
right,
And I really like studying with the teacher at BUTI, and he's like, well, he also teaches at BU and at NEC, so you
hmm
have a choice to make when you start to apply. Are you going to apply for universities, or are you going to apply for conservatories?
conservatory.
And so I ended up applying for like 10 schools, kind of a mix of conservatories and universities. When it came right down to it, I knew that I wanted to go to Boston because I wanted to study with those BSO players. And then for me, between BU and NEC, NEC had the things that I wanted. I wanted a school that had both classical, jazz, and other types of music programs.
Right.
I wanted NEC had just started a groundbreaking program called the Music in Education program, which is specifically for performance majors
hmm
who wanted to get into educational research and policy. Um, and it had a really awesome fixed do solfege program because I really
Uh-huh.
didn't want to do movable do.
Right. You're a fixed dome
Yeah, I was
man
like
from the
super fixed
beginning.
from the
Yeah.
very beginning. Yeah,
Yeah.
so it had those 3 things, and I was like, that's what I'm doing, and
Um,
so that's where I went.
and so I just wanted to talk a little bit briefly about the logistics of auditioning because I know that if there are any students watching, which
Mm,
hopefully they are, it can be a daunting task and a daunting thought to the way, I mean, with other schools and other studies, you
yeah,
can do your application all online, but in most cases, if you're going to audition for whether it's a university or a conservatory, you have to go from Hawaii to that
right,
place.
right. So
And so, did you
one
have to do that?
I did, yeah, and so a couple of things that I did then. I'm not sure if kids still do it now, and I was very fortunate to be able to have the resources to do this. But one thing was because I knew I wanted to go back to Boston, I did
hmm
BUTI a second summer so I could
Right,
develop that relationship, and
right,
not just develop a relationship with Todd, but also take lessons from other guys in the section that also taught in the other like BU, NEC, and Boston Conservatory schools because they all have slightly different faculty lists, and I wanted to be able to have not just like test lessons with them, but have
hmm
a couple of lessons so that they could see if there was any delta in improvement from like 1 week to like 3 weeks later, right? Because the
Wow,
teachers are really
right,
auditioning you, right?
right, right.
Um, as well. And then uh, I didn't do the actual tape. I didn't do the actual live auditions because what I did was I negotiated an opportunity to take a lesson in the fall
Okay,
with the teachers who the other teachers I didn't know.
Right.
So so what was good was we didn't have the pressure of doing all the auditions during the audition tour. But I
Because
did,
you had organized playing privately for them at
right,
BUTI, and they knew you as well, being around BUTI
right.
and
But then
having all
for
the.
like, yeah, but then for like the other schools that weren't in Boston, I tried to find ways that I could, um, take a lesson prior
And
to
for
when the
stu-
actual audition time was going to be.
Right, and for students coming from Hawaii, but for students coming from anywhere really, that
Yeah,
is, I think it's still the same, that it can really increase your chances of having successful audition, finding a way to get in touch with the teacher beforehand,
yeah,
and also can really inform you on what type of teaching and what type of relationship would work for you.
right.
So I think,
It can really hurt also though if you get into the mindset of thinking, well, I'm just going to take a lesson, but
yeah,
you're not thinking of it as an audition.
right,
Because I did screw up one time, and I
yeah.
definitely didn't get into that school
No, it's important, but it's a really important thing because
for grad school. Yeah,
yeah, but it's your point is huge, because I think people don't always know what to do or how to treat a lesson of that. You want to
hmm
go to that school and you don't, but then lessons that you're used to with your teacher from home are going to be completely different.
right. Yeah,
Um,
you have to take kind of I think a more professional angle
and
to them,
audition approach to
and
your
audition
lesson.
approach, and then the thing that you get from taking a lesson that you don't get from doing an audition is that you can go back to that teacher for follow up.
Okay.
And you can generally record the lesson, whereas you may not be
Right.
able to record the live audition.
Right.
You
Okay.
know.
Well, so
Anyway,
then, but so you ended up going to NEC and getting into NEC, which
yeah.
was, I imagine, you wanted to be in Boston, and that's the top conservatory in Boston, was one of your first choices
hmm
to go, and that ended up being with Todd Sievert, right?
Yep. Yep.
And that was with somebody that you had established a relationship at BUTI um, previously.
Yeah. Yeah, and it was good too because like I had friends from BUTI that went to NEC, so I could figure out like what the undergraduate curriculum was. And
Right.
so I was really lucky. I had a good music theory background at Iolani from Richard Hotoke. And
Okay.
so when I got to NEC, I was able to pass out of all of the solfege, theory, and history classes, the required
Wow.
ones. And so I
Wow.
basically got to have my pick of the catalog, even taking graduate classes as an undergrad, so that I could really get the coursework that I wanted. Because otherwise, like, you get stuck in like these basic classes, and
Right.
unless you're doing it like I went back actually to like the early solfege and harmony classes
Uh-huh.
with a teaching perspective to learn how they're taught, how those beginning levels are taught. But if you're just sitting in them because you have to take the class, then it's really rigorous.
Right, and I can say that I had a similar experience when I finally went to Manhattan School of Music, which is another conservatory in New York, obviously, that I had a lot of previous theory and
hmm
history experiences, so I was able to. I had both experiences. I had the experience where I was sitting and not paying attention, and then some of the more advanced sections of different classes that I had passed out of. So, what would the curriculum? Could you just give a really broad overview of what the curriculum would have looked like for you had you
Yeah,
not been prepared, and then what it did end up looking like for you?
wow, this is like ancient history. I think you would
I'm
have,
sorry.
most people do like 2 solid years of fixed still solfege and harmony, counterpoint, and then there's like four, maybe 3 or 4 survey of music history classes, um, and but because I got out of the classical harmony, I was able to get into the jazz harmony. So
Awesome.
that was cool. And then because I got out of the solfege, I ended up taking it as an elective anyway, so that I could learn how to teach it. And then
Oh,
that
wow.
ended up providing me with the guy that was teaching the folks that were teaching solfege at NEC at the time. They all studied with Nadia Boulanger, and
Wow.
so they had like a really really a keen perspective on oral skills.
Yeah.
And so it was really interesting to work with them.
And so you were able to then, I'd say, do more than what is usual, because a lot of times in a big conservatory, which I would say I had some experience with, is I was really classical trumpet and sort of stuck in the classical side of the
Hmm.
department. Where at NEC at the time you went, you were really able to experience also what you had initially sought out to do, which was be involved in the other
Right.
departments, jazz and etc.
Right. I wouldn't have been able to do that if I was just stuck in the classical side, but I was able to, have jazz studio lessons, playing the jazz majors ensembles, not like the non-jazz major ensemble. So that was like it really opened up a huge door, and because of that, like I've got a great network of colleagues that came from all aspects of the conservatory.
Of course,
It was
that's
just a lot
really.
of fun,
And yeah, and that is for students out there. I think it can be missed because I'm a classical this or that, and I want
Hmm.
to do this, and so some of your most learning
Yeah.
outside of playing your instruments can come from that. So as you're getting to your junior senior year, where was your mindset? Music can be a incredibly difficult profession, or is labeled as an
Hmm.
incredibly difficult profession, both to be successful in, and then even when you're successful. Uh, be hard to, for lack of a better word, monetize, or
Yeah.
so what was your mindset like as you were coming out of school?
Well, that was interesting. My junior and senior year, I finally started getting to some of the festivals that I wanted to get into. So I was
Hmm.
really big to go into grad school for performance.
Right.
At the same time, I was starting to experiment with a couple of entrepreneurial ideas. Like most music schools have some sort of like career skills class where like you gotta like learn to write a resume and write a cover letter and take some photos of
Right.
yourself and make a
Hmm.
press kit.
Hmm.
So I had when I started at NEC, I had started this culture club called the NEC Hawaii Club,
Oh wow.
and I was the only person from Hawaii at NEC, but
So
I
you were a
figured
club of one.
no, actually, I was a club of we had about 500 people because I figured out
Whoa.
that if I invited people from across the conservatory to learn about Hawaii, then
Uh-huh.
I could get a cut of student activities monies that we were all paying into it.
Whoa.
And then so we would put on these luau's um, for the entire conservatory to attend. And of
That
course,
is awesome.
if you're gonna have a party, you need food and you need music.
Right.
So I also used some of that money to hire my fellow musicians, so that we could
So,
learn Hawaiian music or together and then perform it at the luau.
and where would that happen? Would that happen in school or like
Yeah, we
outside or?
well, if you've ever been to NEC, before they built the new building,
Uh-huh.
there used to be a parking lot there, the St. Botolph parking lot, but we affectionately would call it the St. Botolph Beach, and so that's where the luau took place.
Well, that is incredible. So no wonder you were so popular there, because you had luau's and a club of 500 people that were enjoying, yeah,
They were
food
finally
and
getting their
music
student
and
activities fees back, so they
yeah.
really liked it,
So that could be
Um,
students from Hawaii maybe should start a club like that.
well, most students from Hawaii have clubs like that in their universities.
Oh,
And
so
so
okay.
and so what we figured out was if we had a band that could perform in those clubs, in those Hawaii clubs, then we could have a whole circuit of luau gigs.
Oh, wow.
And so that was kind of the basis for an idea that I still have today. It's a band called Waitiki.
Uh-huh.
And so that started my senior year at NEC.
So
And
Jeff
then
Silberschlag, my father said genius. This was a genius idea.
yes, Mr. Silberschlag, thank you.
So okay, so you
But then,
you
at the same time, I was also I was really getting into music education
right.
research, and so I was helping to publish an academic journal for music education my senior year, and my it just so happened that the the principal researcher on that journal was also the head of the music and education department at NEC,
Okay.
and he was also um, the head of the solfege department at NEC.
Which you were nailing already. You're a great solfege
Right.
student.
And
Right.
his name is Larry Scripp. He's a great mentor to me.
Hmm.
And and he had gotten his doctorate from the Harvard Graduate School of Education. So
Okay.
he said in music and cognition. So he just kind of threw out the idea, well, as you're applying to graduate schools for performance, why don't you also apply to Harvard? I mean, the only thing they can say is no.
Yeah,
So I
yeah.
said, okay, sure, I'll give that a
So
try.
you thought maybe you would um, do performance, and you just threw in an application basically, or not threw in, but
Yeah, I just threw in an application, and then one day I was walking home from the supermarket, and I get this phone call, and they're like, "Oh, this is the dean of the Harvard Graduate School of Education." And I was like,
wow.
"Oh, you don't even have to call me. I mean, like, there's no way I was expecting to get in." And
Yeah.
they're like, "No, you're coming, you're coming." I was like, "Oh," I was like just screaming. I
Whoa.
couldn't believe it.
That is wild. Yeah.
Yeah.
So a real surprise, a happy surprise that you then applied to the Graduate School of Education, and that's not just music education at all. That's education in your mother says she's learning new stuff about you,
Oh yeah,
and
and
my
your
brother
brother
said
says I
awesome
got an awesome
shirt.
shirt. Yeah, it's called
But
Space Fish. Yeah.
we know we do have some other people that are not related watching, so you should feel good about that. David, I think the trumpet player says hi, and
Yeah, I
okay.
see
Anyway,
Erica. Yeah.
so you it's not just a school. It's a school for education and across all mediums, right? The
Yeah,
graduate
it's not
school.
right. Yeah, it's not just music. In fact, I was one of two musicians in my class. There's a class of we had a class of about 45 people,
Wow.
and it was really intimidating. I mean, they're uh, all much older than I. In fact, I haven't even reached the median age now of what the median
Still.
age of the class was. So,
Right. So you were a
um,
young conservatory student attending Harvard, and there was, I imagine, business elements to that education department education as well, right?
yeah, and so I did get into performance grad school, and so I deferred that by a year so that I could do the Harvard thing, but I had to do the
Which,
Harvard thing in a year.
so that was a year. Did you double up and do it faster?
I did it really intensely.
So you did it so that you could go back to NEC and finish a perform or begin and finish a
No, I was going to go to
performance.
Carnegie. I went to Carnegie Mellon for my master's
Oh.
in performance, but I didn't finish that. Yeah.
Okay, so you went to NEC, you went to Harvard, and what kind of things did you learn in the? Is there any broad takeaways that you really apply now in terms of uh, education administration and things like that? Was it helpful?
Yeah, it was absolutely helpful. I think one thing that's a good takeaway is to the importance of getting outside of your comfort zone.
Mm-hmm.
I was checking out another Instagram live interview a little while ago, and it was also about music, and the person was saying um, was really saying how awesome it is to if you're starting your career or you're going into music, that every job you take is related to music. Everything that you do is completely related to music. And in the case of me going to Harvard, it wasn't really related to music. It was
Mm-hmm.
related broadly to arts education and to
Right.
the importance of it. But it took me out of my comfort zone. It took me out of a practice room, number one, and
Right.
it put me in with a lot of people who really didn't have any knowledge, any personal knowledge of music. Um, and it was the first time that I had to think about, how do you explain music's worth? Like, why is it important for every child to have music in their education when you're talking to someone who has never had music in their lives?
Right. Right.
And these people were extremely passionate about the arts, but they weren't musicians.
Right.
And
Which
so
as
that was the
our
first
as yeah.
that was
Go
the
ahead,
first time
please.
I ever really thought about that. And had
Right.
I just stayed in a conservatory experience, all the time, I would have started thinking about that much later.
Right. And I think that's a hugely impactful statement for all of us, because not only as a role in administration, like being a president of the youth symphony, but as musicians, more and more we're having to explain what it is we do and the value of what we do to
Hmm.
people that have not experienced it.
Yep.
And
Yep.
so that is awesome. So you finished there. You went to. Did you spend more time in Boston or Cambridge after you were done there? And were you playing with the Waitiki?
Waitiki? Yeah. I was playing with Waitiki throughout my Harvard year. I was still taking lessons at Symphony Hall. The same time I started a record label and music publishing company, Pass
Wow.
Out Records, which is still in existence today. And we've basically we had this idea, like, what would it be like as musicians to own everything that you do? As orchestral musicians, we don't own anything, right?
Right.
And we own the notes that we play on stage, but only in that moment that they're being played, not after, right?
Right.
And so, and we don't make any decisions as to what repertoire we play or what's on the concert program or any of that stuff, right? So anyway, my friend Abe Lagrimas, who's also from Hawaii, and Eric Lagrimas, his brother, we were all in school in Boston at the time, and look, we were just saying, well, if we compose our own music, we record our own music, like we don't go to a studio, but we own, we figure out how to do all the recording. Then we learn how to publish the recording. You get the copyrights with the Library of Congress for the recording, and then you file all the licenses with BMI and ASCAP, and we become BMI songwriters, and we create our own record label and our own music publishing, and we have the whole thing. What would that be like? And so we decided to do it one summer, and it really worked out because we were able, at the time, people were still listening to music in restaurants, like off of Muzak and stuff.
Right.
And so we were able to license our music to Muzak, and so like if you're on hold with like United Airlines, or you're walking through Walgreens, or you're down in Waikiki and some hotels playing some song. I mean, we wrote like a huge catalog of songs, took it through that whole process, and we became music business people before it was kind of before it was the thing to do.
Before it was cool.
What I mean?
Yeah. That's incredible. And I do you think that, because I do feel really like what you're saying is now, do you feel you were doing it at a time where it was more possible, or that you, because you had this broader education at this point, had the skills to use what you had learned to put it to a creative?
I think it was a combination. Like we're really ambitious. We wanted to kind of make a name for music from Hawaii without it necessarily being like traditional Hawaiian music.
Right.
We found in the case of Waitiki, we found that there's a lot of folks out there, particularly on the East Coast and in the Midwest, who really love exotica music, which is this music from mid-century Hawaii and West Coast, and nobody was doing that music in an acoustic way that had the same performance practice as what was being done in the 50s.
Wow.
So we kind of found out how to like get into those different markets, and then we're musicians, so you just continually tinker it until you find success.
That's incredible.
But there wasn't social media really back then. So if Instagram and stuff existed 15 years ago, we would have definitely been killing
on the gram.
Yeah.
But so you think that the social media that is here and the resources that we as young musicians and hopefully entrepreneurs have, that's a plus. That would not have held you back.
It's absolutely a plus. Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So then how did you, I mean, you're in Hawaii now, so how did you end up coming back, or what was that post did you go to Carnegie Mellon after that?
I went to Carnegie Mellon for a year. I didn't finish the degree because NEC lured me back to join their faculty, their music and education faculty. So that was like an offer I couldn't turn down. So I started that in 2005. I think I was, again, it was a fish out of water experience, to be a student back at the same school, but be now an alum and a faculty member the same age or younger than most of the people that I was teaching. So that was really
and that was probably at that point one of the first of what has now become a real staple of conservatories and definitely
Yeah.
universities, which is like a program that is there to arm students with some practice in education administration to go with their performing. Is that?
Yeah. We had a philosophy called the artist, teacher, scholar philosophy. And it was at the time, everyone was like, it was the traditional thing was that you're either a performer or you're a teacher.
Right.
And then maybe you're like a scholarly professor or someone, and you don't get out and you don't do any teaching or performing, right?
Right.
But
Right.
but the philosophy of NEC at that time was that um, great musicians are all three.
Yeah.
Okay, so like if you're like you take someone like really anybody, Rostropovich, or someone like studying all the cello suites, right? Pierre Fournier. And what did it take for that person to be a master of Bach?
Uh-huh.
It's not just moving your arms,
Right. Right.
right? There's a lot of study that goes into it. Yo-Yo Ma is another great example.
Right. And so I think your point here, which is I think so important and fundamental to both how we exist as musicians now, but also how it really encouraging it should be to students that would like to pursue music, is it's not one thing or another. And I think that the path is it maybe is less choice driven than becomes organically laid out for you as you become the best educated person, the best performer,
Yeah.
the best.
Right.
And so
there's an artistry to teaching.
Yeah,
There's an
it's not an
artistry
either
of,
or.
Right.
Right.
Right. Right.
And I think also what you were saying with Rostropovich and Fournier, I mean, Yo-Yo Ma especially, that a lot of we don't see it because even friends of mine now that as I've gone through the conservatory system, they say exactly what you think, that what the trope is that you're a performer or you're a teacher or you're not. And coming from the family that I've come from with professional musicians who have graduated conservatory and gone on to do all of the holy trinity that you've described as performing and teaching and educating.
We're lucky to see that in the schools. I mean, of every school that has a band or orchestra program here, their teachers are scholars, they're artists, and of course they're amazing teachers. I mean, I have not yet met a school director that can't play. They all can play, and they play for their kids, and our kids are so lucky,
Right. And so, and even what you're talking about is that somebody like Yo-Yo Ma, it'd be easy to not see it because you just have his recordings of the Haydn cello concerti or something like that, but he's doing the Silk Road and these project-oriented ensembles with hugely with a lot of like educational and historical context of bringing all of these things in together, right?
Exactly. Yeah, we often only see the product. We only see the product, but there's a great process behind it. And every musician is both an expert and a student of the process. It's cyclical, teaching and learning. And so if we have teachers who are if we have performers who are already getting a conservatory training, we should absolutely employ and deploy them into the workforce, because our students are going to be that much better for it. What's better than having?
Go ahead.
What's better than having someone who spent 500 hours learning how to play a concerto, than to have that person take you through their process?
Right. Yeah. Right. And it's invaluable, and those people have to share that information. So you were working at NEC now on the faculty, and it's my understanding that you were going then at some point back and forth from Honolulu to NEC.
Yeah.
How did that come about, and why did that start, and how did that go?
I'd been coming back home. I was coming back home like maybe 4 or 5 times a year. And then right before I moved back to Hawaii, I think 2010, I came back to Hawaii like 8 or 9 times. for for varying like gigs and other sorts of things, other sorts of projects. And so I started to think, and my role at NEC had really, part of it was being on faculty there, but other part of it was administering this Music and Education National Consortium, in which NEC was the lead organization in like out of like 15 different states and like 30 school districts and stuff. So for that job, I was traveling constantly anyway.
Right.
And so I just started wondering, would it be possible for me to make my home base in Hawaii as opposed to Boston and avoid the winters?
And it was.
And
Awesome.
it was. Yeah, so we moved. And
your wife at that time, right?
Well, my wife, my only wife, so both.
You're
at
still
that time
you're still your wife, right?
Yeah, as far as I know.
Sorry.
And no, and so she, we just started looking for a different opportunity, and I figured out that I could keep my job at NEC. They were super happy to let me continue on faculty and just having moved, and Honolulu Hawaii Symphony was being reformed, so we're hoping to get in on the ground floor and start to sub again, and it just all really worked out.
So what year was this that you made it? Or around what year? And so at
2000.
what point?
It was about 2011. So I started.
The Honolulu Symphony had gone through a bankrupt period, and at that point was starting to reform as the Hawaii Symphony.
Yep.
Okay. And so you were in the hopes of subbing and being involved with the symphony at that point, and you were still working at NEC.
Yep.
And on the road all the time.
Yep.
Okay. And I should come up with a question that you can answer, right?
No, I don't know.
Yeah. No.
Yeah, and then March of 2012, I got my dream scenario. HSO
Which
restarted. Hawaii Symphony started up, and got the invitation to be in the bass section, and at the same time is like almost like within a couple of hours, I got a letter from the board chair at HYS inviting me to become its next executive director.
Wow. So that was not in the works, or that was not premeditated, but it just
all by
sort
luck.
of came about. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so you hadn't planned to, because I admire you so much because you're able to put into practice everything that you've learned. That's from the education and performance in a way that I think is really unique and special. So I'm
very lucky. I mean, when we first moved back, I was one of the first teachers in the El Sistema Hawaii program, Kaliko Lehua, run by Louise Lancelotti, and I was like really enjoying that. We were out up on the North Shore at Ka'ava Elementary, and Joan Doike was teaching violin, and I was teaching solfege to the kids, and I was like in my happy place,
Yeah. And so you got this. Suddenly, you were in the symphony, and then you got asked to become the executive director of HYS. So here's a question that I think is important for a lot of people. What is an executive director?
You know what? I'll be honest. I didn't really know when I applied either. It's the executive director is the person who is responsible for all aspects of the organization. So anything related to finances, fundraising, strategy, in our case, education, community development, and partnerships, working with the board, working with donors, working with volunteers, and of course, managing an amazing staff.
And I think you told me, I asked you once, I think I was just having a meal with you, and I asked you, and you said an executive director also has to be willing to do every facet of the job that's involved in your organization, and so can you expand that a little bit? And what is that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of like when you work in a restaurant, like the great general managers are the ones who are able to do everything. They're able to do everything from dishwashing to busing to serving to talking with guests and everything. And in a nonprofit organization, as an executive director, I think it's so important to have all aspects of the organization under your belt as much as possible, just so that you can have real conversations with the people who are actually doing the work, and know when, know where the boundaries are so that you don't get in their way, so that they can really make the most of their talents, and
And so,
that's something, yeah.
no, please go ahead.
I was just going to say that that's something that is difficult, I think, as an executive director, and that's something that
Yeah,
I'm continually trying to figure out,
yeah. And uh, I know that you are responsible for. So the Pacific Music Institute existed before you were there,
Oh
right?
yeah, yeah. In fact, I was a student in it. PMI was started by Maestro Miyamura and Maestro Lance Joe from Maui.
Mm-hmm.
It started as the Maui Music Camp in 1983 or 84,
Mm-hmm.
and it's been a great part of HYS.
And so to bring it a little bit full circle, now a student from Hawaii could also go to you've expanded greatly the Pacific Music Institute, also in collaboration with the National Orchestral Institute, which I know you're an alum of. And
Hmm.
so
Hmm.
that's, I think, creating the highest level of music education. That's something like you would find at BUTI, and making it possible for students from Hawaii to not have to even travel as far to
Yeah,
do something like that. Is
right.
that
Yeah,
correct?
that's that's that's
And
that's part of the idea behind it. Yeah.
and so I know we were really, really sad that 2020 is not happening, but it's looking to come back stronger than ever in 2021, right?
Yeah. Yeah. 2021 will come back with a, whatever the word is, with a vengeance, or with at
And
least
so
a big gong.
with with PMI, I know that that impacts the musicians, the music students from the other islands that can come to Oahu to do that during the summer. But could you just tell me just a little bit about what music education is like on the other outer islands, and how that works? Because I know it's a really unique situation for the youth symphony.
Sure thing. Well, I mean, the neighbor islands all have really different different music education communities, and we're
Mm-hmm.
we're really fortunate to be able to partner with the folks that are already out there, because they're doing a great job. On Kauai, Sarah Tochiki and Daryl Miyasato have really developed a really incredible music education system that goes from the Boys and Girls Clubs all the way up through the college level. On Maui, they have, the Maui Arts and Cultural Center, and of course the Maui Youth Philharmonic Orchestra, which also was founded by, Lance Joe. And we've had a lot of really great musicians that have come from Maui over to Oahu. We're just starting to get to know the communities on Hawaii Island, on Lanai, and on Molokai. We've been partnering with Bob Underwood over at Kaunakakai Elementary on Molokai. He's got a great after-school strings program. We've had the opportunity to bring some of our faculty from HYS over there to work with the kids and to provide them with private lessons. In fact, I believe that was the first time that those students had ever had private lessons. And
That's
then
incredible.
we brought Molokai students to PMI last summer. So we had,
Mm-hmm.
I think, like 9 or 10 Molokai students.
Wow.
And we're just at the very beginning stages. I mean, we are the Hawaii Youth Symphony, and we have a vision to make music a right and not a privilege. But unfortunately,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of, we've just been very Oahu centric because
Mm-hmm.
of, just the way things have been. And we really want to try and
Right,
reach out
but I know
further.
it's having a great impact, because I have some trumpet students, and I have one trumpet student in particular that it lives in Kauai, and I know has attended the
Hmm.
Youth Symphony, and it's made a
Yeah.
huge difference to them.
Hmm.
So um, I really appreciate all the efforts, as I know everybody in the state does. So just a little bit more briefly about what do you find, how do you balance both being the president of the Youth Symphony and being in the section at the Hawaii Symphony? And are there challenges involved with that, or none?
Yeah, no, it's hard. I mean, Hawaii Symphony, the programming is challenging. It's demanding. The bass parts are demanding, and there's a really high bar, both in the section and in the orchestra that for us to meet. And so it's time management, and it's checking out recordings. And luckily, I've got great section mates. So if I have a boneheaded question about a bowing or a finger or something, I can reach out to them, and they've always been very helpful.
And so, how have you seen the level of the orchestra change, or not the level necessarily, but the organization change since you started in 2012?
Well, I think it's been great to see the level of progression of Hawaii Symphony in terms of like organizational growth. I think, probably for any organization, the first few years is, a little tricky, but we never really saw that with HSO. I always thought HSO was on the up and up, and Jonathan Parrish did a great job. We're lucky to have had him for 6 years. He was a great partner to HYS.
Right.
Scott Harrison.
And another administrator and performer.
Yes,
was a horn player, right?
Ministry. Yeah. And I think we're getting into a phase now among orchestra leadership where it's okay to be an administrator who was or is an orchestral musician. I think there used to be a double standard there. And of course, I'm biased, but I think there's some good things to offer. When you have an administrator who understands the true business of the orchestra. Right,
and so we're and Scott Harrison, who you mentioned, who was our intern.
Scott Harrison, and now Dave Moss is the violist. Yeah. And
we're very excited about Dave Moss, who's already off to very exciting things in his tenure. So, yeah. So sorry, any more things you want to say about the expanded HSO, or I think you covered
love it
wonderfully.
No, man. I love it. I love HSO. I'm a seasoned subscriber and a monthly donor, and I just anything that I can do to support HSO. I mean, this orchestra is like, it's our hometown orchestra. We have to do everything that we can to support it.
Absolutely. Okay, so this is a fire round of questions, just to finish up. What keeps you inspired in this quarantine time?
Man, I love checking out what our students are doing. A lot of our students are musicians and they post online. Our teachers are really getting involved in all kinds of online music, posting a cappella videos and stuff. So that's really keeping me going. I love, there's a lot of Instagram accounts that I follow, of both classical and non-classical musicians. Brady Watt Bass, he's a bass player, but he plays for Warren G. And so he's got a lot of great stuff. Jacob Collier, who's a phenomenal multi-instrumentalist. Joshua Roman, all those guys. Jake Shimabukuro, of course. All of that.
Okay, so I'm getting messages that Instagram lasts only an hour and we have 1 minute to go. So in my 1 minute, I want you to say, can you fire off some Hawaii-specific restaurants that you love?
Okay, the Nook, Encore, the Daily, Taco Ako, Bevy, Pint and Jigger for the burgers.
Right.
Pig and the Lady,
Encore,
Moke's for brunch.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. We can put in the comments a list, because in the last 30 seconds, I have to thank you immensely for doing this and being willing to be my first interviewee. And what a terrific
Dude, you're
job
amazing. Thank you for
done.
the opportunity.
Thank you, Randy. The Dewdrop Inn, yes. And where also the burgers in Chinatown? Where do we go?
I'd say go to the Daily.
Daily, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway,
or Square Barrel.
Thank you, Randy. Thank you for doing this, and you're incredible. And I look forward to seeing you in person after this quarantine is over.
Dude,
and
thank
we're
you
getting
so much.
A lot of good jobs, and bravo. Thank you. All right.
Thank
we'll
you.
Talk
Bye,
soon.
everybody.
Bye.